And on today's podcast, we are going to, one, give you all an update because it's been a while since we've actually done a podcast. We've had a lot of things happen over the past month and into even beyond that. So we apologize for not being so consistent, but we are now planning on doing one episode a week. Most likely going to be released on the weekend when we actually have some time to do it now. So to give everybody an update on my current situation with my bicep, I am going to my 3-month appointment this next week on Friday. I believe then they are going to start to give me stuff to do for physical therapy. I've been doing some training in terms of legs a few times a week. I tried doing some upper body stuff. You obviously can't get a really good workout when you have a torn bicep and you can't really pull or you're afraid to push. Because even with things like push-ups, we are told not to do it. I will say that I have been able to keep myself on the leaner side in terms of body composition, but I am definitely losing muscle, and you could see that via photos and obviously on the scale weight. So yes, I'm on the leaner side, but around 186, which is normally like my stage weight, and trust me, I am not stage ready right now. So there is a loss of some muscle tissue, and that's probably going to persist for another couple months until I could really start to throw some weight back onto the bars that I'm pushing around. So that's just a quick update on my bicep. Another update, if you've been following my social media, my dog just had to have some pretty extensive surgery because he was hit by a car. He is okay, I would say, for the most part. He seems to be healing up pretty well. He has an appointment on this Tuesday coming up to where they're going to check him out for his 2-week appointment or his 2-week follow-up after surgery. He's hobbling around. He seems to be a little bit depressed because he can't do what he wants to do, which is he's a puppy, so he wants to run around. He wants to play. He tried to chase my stepson up stairs the other day and almost fell down the stairs. So he doesn't know his limitations yet, but I will say, for the most part, he's not pushing the issue either. So he is sort of favoring that one side, even though both sides are injured. But overall, he's alive. We're happy about that. And just fortunate enough to be able to at least have the surgery and keep him, pain-free and as a dog. So I'm happy about that. And then Eva is growing. She's over the 3-month mark, and she is very, very talkative. She talks to me all the time. She talks to Eryn all the time. She's going to be a yapper for sure. And Eryn likes to call her a party girl because she likes to stay up late. So, you got anything to say about Eva with that?
No, I think she gets the party girl from you.
From me. From my,
not from my side. I was a nerd.
From my young days in New Jersey, huh?
Yeah.
Going down the shore for Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
MDW. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is a little bit of a controversial issue. Not to us, but to a lot of people out there, especially those that are big on conspiracy theories. So one of the biggest conspiracy theorists out there today, I believe, is RFK Jr. He posts a lot of stuff. He says a lot of stuff. He gives a lot of statistics that honestly I think he makes up, and he just says it because no one's really going to do their due diligence to go back and check it. For the people that do go back and check it, they realize how much of a quack he really is. I know you, Eryn, mentioned something to me about how he had a parasite eat his brain or something.
I don't know the details. He had a parasitic infection that affected his brain, and
shows.
Had surgery. Yes, I like to joke that it really does show.
It shows. Just a lot of the claims that he says is very outlandish, and you'll notice that a lot of doctors, which I would say a good portion of the population doesn't trust. They think that they're in with big pharma and everybody's out to get them, and that's just their conspiracy way of believing and living life. But a lot of these legitimate doctors, they pretty much combat almost everything he says. And if you've ever read the book, like Dr. Eryn has, you kind of can laugh at this guy for some of the claims that he makes.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not going to go into the books. I just, whatever your political opinion is about RFK, maybe some of our listeners maybe like him. Some of them probably hate them. I know from as far as my colleagues go and the ones that actually look at any kind of evidence-based research and follow medical professional guidelines, they are very disappointed in and that's kind of mildly saying it, in this in RFK directing our health initiatives in this country. But I think, after reading, I wanted to read his book because I wanted to understand a little bit of where he might have gotten so off the beaten path of evidence, which didn't help me at all. But I also wanted to figure out why he believed what he believed, because it's so out of left field to me. So anyway, maybe you can comment on that too, like your thoughts, or maybe I influenced your thoughts on him.
I don't think you influenced. I think you exacerbated it, because I was always thinking he was off. I never believed his stuff with vaccines and autism. I just don't believe it. And him going, the thing is like, I really think he cares about the children of the United States. And I really believe he thinks he's probably doing good. So I want to say he's doing everything with the best intention, but it's wrong.
That's the way that, what is it? That's the way to hell, like it's paved with good intentions.
I never heard that, but that sounds pretty good.
I don't think he means to do, well, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know his motivation. I just wanted to understand maybe where this was coming from. I will say Malcolm Gladwell put out a pretty good podcast on RFK, and this idea for this podcast came from that, because understanding like where maybe he got some of these theories that he kind of goes off on, where a lot of what he thinks is the environment is bad, and what we're like, the food is bad, which our food sources are bad, and that's why our nation, and I'm generalizing here, is so unhealthy, quote unquote. A lot of the wellness influencers kind of follow the same theory, these holistic people, functional providers. I mean, you can kind of take that whole group and summarize that, and pretty much that's what they believe, right? If we can fix our nutrition and our external environment, then we'd have a healthier population.
Well, I think it gives everyone like that believes that an excuse, right? It's like, oh, well, if you look at, eating pasta here compared to Italy, you're going to gain weight here. You don't gain weight in Italy. It gives them an excuse almost as like, we're going to put the blame on something else. We're going to put the blame on the chemicals being used. We're going to put the blame on these phytoestrogens and these plastics, and we're going to put all the blame there and not so much within ourselves, and actually controlling, what we're eating, being mindful with that, and trying to go about it the healthiest way possible. But I also think they exploit things sort of like organic versus non-organic foods, and how organic is going to be way superior when in reality it's not. And they use the whole chemical aspect of it to kind of push that narrative. So I think it is very nuanced. I think it exploits certain things, certain narratives, but I will say for the most part that when you basically summarize all of the things that these individuals are saying and preaching, number one, they all speak the same script, and it's kind of like the Dave Asbury's and Gary Brecka's looking.
I think he might be nominated for something.
No,
soon.
Yeah, probably.
Given the current nominations in the health industry.
Well, you mean with Casey Means and
yep.
Yeah. But if you look at like everything that they're saying, everything is so like, let me pull out just one ingredient or one chemical and let me show the world how bad this is for you. And in reality, that's not how the world works. Like, chemicals work together and not isolated in a fucking vacuum. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into this. I will say the podcast changed a little bit from what you said, because initially I was like, hey, why don't you just go in and like go over and debunk all of his claims because that's what our conversations. And you're like, you know what? I listened to Malcolm Gladwell, and he kind of had a really cool perspective with why this guy thinks this way, and I really want to know like why he thinks this way. That makes you a better person than me because I don't care why he thinks that way. I'm just like, stop putting out bullshit information. But let's go into that a little bit. So why don't you kind of go into what you found out in terms of like doing your research on why RFK believes what he actually believes.
All right. Well, so I think it's very helpful to name his belief system. And he does actually, there is theories out there that he does follow, or it appears that he does follow. He's made reference to it a couple of times. He doesn't really come out and say, this is the theory I believe in, but I think it coincides with a lot of the information he puts out. And I'd like to say, I mean, you kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, if we fix our nutrition and we actually take personal responsibility, I would say that that's actually part of his movement. Like the Make America Healthy Again is taking personal responsibility. But again, when you try to simplify disease states into one thing, you are missing the point because it's so much more complex. So let's start with that idea. And then let's delve into why RFK maybe thinks the way that he does. So it has been postulated that he believes in quote unquote host theory. There's a bunch of other names for this theory. It's also called pleomorphic theory or terrain theory. Terrain theory is kind of the one that came up the most as far as nomenclature when I was looking into this. But basically it comes from a guy named Antoine Béchamp. He was a 19th century French scientist who basically was in straight opposition from Louis Pasteur.
And Pasteur did the pasteurization.
Correct, yeah. Right?
So
Louis Pasteur's germ theory, and we'll kind of delve into that. But let's talk about Béchamp's pleomorphic theory first, because I had no idea about this being from medical perspective. I was a biology undergrad, so obviously I heard about Louis Pasteur germ theory, but I don't remember Béchamp's theory at all because it was written off. So Béchamp, his key idea was that microorganisms like bacteria are not necessarily the cause of disease, but rather the result of diseased tissue. So what does that mean? He believed that like these tiny little particles called microzymes exist in living things and can change form. That's where the pleomorphism comes in, depending on the environment inside the body. So basically, they focus on your internal health, your internal environment. So disease basically arises from an unhealthy internal environment. So that would say poor nutrition. And now we're getting into like tag terms that influencers like toxins, stress. So anything that would throw your internal system off that you actually can control actually causes the disease state in combination with these microzomas, and they can change based on your internal environment. Versus,
are they? Does he think that they're there initially and they change based off the condition? Like if your condition changes, they change to make it worse?
So yeah. So basically, your internal environment is going to determine whether you get an infection or not. That's the theory. Okay. So Louis Pasteur, who came up with the germ theory, which all modern medicine took off after because we have evidence of this, basically said microbes come from the outside of the body and can cause disease, period. It doesn't matter the internal environment. Pasteur's theory obviously won out in mainstream science because it led to vaccines, antibiotics, and modern infection control. Béchamp argued that Pasteur oversimplified disease and that terrain, so the body's internal environment, is more important than the germ. So basically, Béchamp kind of said, listen, the internal environment of the host, of the human, is more important than the germ. Whereas Louis Pasteur was like, no, it's actually the microorganism that is the most important variable here. And then it is affected by internal environment, but it's actually the germ that causes the problem.
So would Béchamp's like argue the position of like, well, if I eat bad spinach and get E. coli, that's because of my internal environment?
Yes.
Not because there's E. coli written.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, so that doesn't, to us in modern medicine, it doesn't make sense, right? Because if we had followed that theory, then we would be focusing on fixing people's internal environment and not the microorganism itself, and preventing that disease state from happening in the first place, right? So
like uncooked pork, you get trichinosis, but you're saying that Béchamp would be like, no, you got trichinosis because your internal environment.
Yeah, you're missing something. Correct.
Oh,
okay. Which doesn't make any. I can't wrap my head around. As a physician, it doesn't make sense.
I'm thinking of examples in my head right now, trying to understand.
Yeah.
Like, well, can he have some validity here? But I mean, is he? It's almost like unless you have like this superior immune defense system. I don't actually.
It doesn't make sense because we wouldn't have vaccines, and which is funny because RFK is kind of against vaccines, so it makes sense that he would be.
He says he's not against vaccines, even though the narrative he pushes is to not get vaccines because they cause harm.
And I think that's another topic for another
we could touch
episode.
On it. We could touch a little bit.
But anyway. It does make sense. It coincides with Béchamp's theory again. Like I said, he's indirectly referred to these beliefs. So why is it still talked about? Because alternative medicine, right? And holistic health people are always saying that you don't have the right nutrition, you don't have you're not doing the right things for your body, and thus, you're more prone to getting infections. Now, is that completely untrue? Probably not. I would say that there is some credence to that, but to just write off germ theory and say that Louis Pasteur had no bearing in science is, to me, it's asinine. I can't even wrap my head around that.
The only thing that I would say in argument to this, because I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, I'm really trying here, is that if you're not healthy, you're more likely to show worse effects of a disease. So, for example, if you keep yourself in a healthier state, you might be able to fight off the disease a lot quicker, maybe not even show severe symptoms, compared to someone who is unhealthy.
I agree to make it, but my point is that there's an oversimplification. So it's either 100%. This or that,
yep.
And it's either Pasteur or Béchamp. And really, in reality, the answer is between, but somewhere in between there, right? Because
leaning more towards Pasteur.
Correct, yeah. But because we have proof that works, right? We have proof that vaccines work. We have proof that there are germs. We've seen microorganisms under microscopes. We've seen them attack healthy hosts, for example. Anyway, we'll get into it. But I think that, again, and when anyone tries to oversimplify disease states, they are wrong, period. They negate the complexity of a human being, essentially.
Yeah. So how does this tie RFK in? What does RFK have to do with Béchamp and Pasteur?
All right.
Where does this go?
So RFK has publicly expressed ideas that align with aspects of Béchamp's theory, like I said. Especially, he has criticized germ theory and has supported quote unquote terrain theory. He has questioned the dominant medical model, which does depend on germ theory. We focus on attacking pathogens, i.e. vaccines and antibiotics. That's why they exist, because we thought there's a bad pathogen. So we can essentially get rid of that with these vaccines or antibiotics. And he has also questioned the idea that germs alone cause disease. He's one of the ones that will come out and emphasize that a healthy immune system and internal environment are what really, really matter, which doesn't mean that doesn't matter. I'm just saying his emphasis is so far to Béchamp the healthy immune system, that he writes everything else off.
Yeah.
Again, it's an oversimplification of disease states.
Well, if you look at like the spread of infectious diseases, the main thing that people can do, or at least the CDC says and the WHO says, is basically you need to wash your hands, because the germs, for lack of a better term, are going to be on your hands, which will then pass it to another person. So if you listen to that, but you're questioning RFK, right? Like RFK is like, no, like you don't have to. It's basically like you don't have to wash your hands because if your internal environment's good, like you're fine.
Yes.
And it's like, no, that's bullshit, because the biggest thing you can do to stop the spread of infectious disease is
John
to wash
Snow.
your fucking hands.
John Snow, who's the father of public health, discovered this back in London. So again, RFK also thinks that there's an over-reliance on pharmaceutical solutions, which again sounds good. Like, a lot of people do think that. A lot of patients are like, I don't want to take medications. So I can understand how this appeals to the public, right? When you're trying to get healthy, I can see how his mantra might appeal to certain people, because they aren't necessarily bad things, but there's an over-reliance on it where everything is written off, because, if you fix your health and your nutrition and your diet, then you're going to have a perfect immune system. No, you're not. You will still get infections. If you take pills or you have a pharmaceutical intervention, that doesn't mean that you did something wrong with your internal environment. Some people have genetic issues. Some people have healthy immune systems and you get a bad infection. Healthy people get colds all the time.
Listen, I'm going to be honest. If you get staph infection from, like, I got staph infection in college because I got turf burn from the football field, and they weren't like turning the beads in there. So basically, I got staph infection in my elbow and had to go literally to the emergency room, and they put like 4 or 5 needles in me, and they were cutting things out. I don't know. It was weird, but I know that I had to be put on antibiotics. I had to be put on pharmaceuticals for that, because my body wouldn't be able to fight that off, right? I just think that pushing the narrative of the over-reliance on pharmaceutical solutions, I think that goes in line with the other narrative. They kind of they cross-pollinate each other here, is that big pharma's out to get everybody, right? They want to keep you sick, because if people are sick, it's more money. And it's like, wait a minute, like if someone needs a statin because they have issues, and their statins are going to help
They're proven.
They're proven to
They
help.
work.
If someone needs thyroid medication because they have a underactive thyroid, it works, it helps. If you are obese and you're diabetic and you go on a GLP-1, that can help save your life.
Yeah.
We
have these medications for a reason.
Yes.
Thank God we have modern science and these medications to actually help us. Because if we didn't have them, we're dialing it back to the dark ages when people used to die because of simple
Plagues.
infections. Yeah. And so I that's where it becomes ridiculous to me. RFK hasn't particularly name dropped Antoine Béchamp, but he does share platforms with people that believe in alternative medicine, and they support these theories directly, support pleomorphism and the terrain theory. He's obviously promoted views that challenge mainstream virology and vaccine science, especially during COVID-19. And now as he's getting into regulating vaccines, and he's kind of gone to this model of, well, vaccines aren't not necessarily not helpful, but you should kind of be able to decide. And I think that that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But
we'll touch on it again.
But so let's talk about how Béchamp's theory is flawed specifically.
Well, before you even get to that, I remember, so I was just on a podcast where they wanted to talk about functional coaches. So I was doing my due diligence and just making sure I had all my facts in a row. Is it called the American Association of Medical Societies? Is that what it's called?
AMA, American Medical Association.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I know that them in particular wrote off alternative medicine. They're not accepted at all.
Correct.
And so
it's not a board certified specialty.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, you can take elective courses in it, but It's not
bullshit.
It's bullshit.
So you have this person who's
it's not proven. There's no evidence. There's no good evidence-based studies that say, some of their theories or some of these premises that they follow. And I'm speaking very generally here. There's not really good evidence.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is that you have this person that is running our health department for this country who is believing stuff that is not accepted by the AMA.
Yes, it's
which is, to me,
disheartening for all the people, for medical doctors.
Conventional medicine can be disheartening as well to some aspects, but still, conventional medicine has evidence behind it. It's proven. It's just there's some things that we could fix, like bedside manner, maybe more time with patients, that type of stuff.
Yeah,
not so much insurance based.
Maybe Anyway, we digress.
Yeah, we're going off.
But so let's talk about modern medicine is basically based on germ theory. Germ theory has extensively been validated through centuries of research, from identifying specific pathogens. Like I said, we can see these under the microscope, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, TB, for example, and we have successfully eradicated diseases like smallpox with vaccines. So if we didn't believe in germ theory, a lot of the vaccines wouldn't have come to fruition. We can visualize, culture, and sequence pathogens, so we know they exist. They're not just passive byproducts of a diseased body. They actively replicate, invade, and trigger immune responses. So the counterpoint to terrain theory, basically, if germs were only opportunists, why would healthy individuals get sick from measles, COVID-19, influenza? Like I said, colds. They exist. There are pathogens out there that infect healthy hosts, period.
It's funny labeling terms as opportunists.
Yeah. Well, opportunistic infections are another one.
I'm saying it's kind of poetic in a sense to visualize that.
Well, of course. There's some poetry in medicine. So infections also clearly spread person to person.
Wash your hands.
Yeah. And healthy people that get infected with a bad pathogen, for example, can spread disease. Outbreaks happen in patterns that directly support transmission of microbes. COVID-19, flu, strep throat, all clear epidemiological chains. Infected people with no prior immune compromise, so internal environment, can spread disease. These patterns are not explained by internal terrain alone. So a beautiful example, which RFK actually talks about in his book. I encourage you to go read it. I won't get into the details here. The 1918 flu. Who did it kill? It killed healthy people. The people that it killed were young and previously healthy. Terrain theory does not explain.
Why would he talk about that in his book if it literally
because he's totally against it, because he was and I don't remember specifics of the argument, but he does go into why it would be healthy people that, and I think part of it was that he didn't believe that. He thought there were other things going on with those people, right? So again, I encourage, if you really believe in RFK and all his theories, go read his book. Well, it's very, very interesting.
Wait a minute. If you have the people who want to believe in him and they read his book, they are going to take what he says as law.
Yeah, you should also look at the opposing points.
You need to have an
My
open
favorite
mind.
one is his HIV theory.
What happened with that?
He doesn't really believe that AIDS is caused by HIV, which is interesting. Again, I'm not going to get into his book, but just if you really believe in something, I encourage you to go read the book, and then to go read what mainstream science says about that. It is an interesting thing.
Does he list sources in there?
100%. Of course. RFK has sources.
Do your due diligence and go and look at the sources.
And I will say this. Listen, it's difficult to look at these sources, and I'm being a bit facetious here. He does have sources. He pulls these stats out of somewhere. They're usually papers that are written that are not scientifically vetted. So a lot of these papers are maybe a case study or a correlation study or a small population or maybe a white paper. These aren't real papers that follow mainstream medicine. They're like the one paper that was written by some person about an opinion, and then they gave random statistics. It's not what mainstream medicine follows. It's not what the evidence shows time after time after time in multiple studies, right?
Well, speaking of evidence, I want to jump into vaccines and antibiotics, because I know there's a ton of evidence there, and I know he's against at least vaccines.
I don't think this is the right thing, but I will generally speak that I will get into my opinions here, but
well, that's the point of our podcast. We need to express your opinion.
So, the fact that, for example, what's going on in Texas and some other states where the measles outbreaks, where you've given parents the choice to vaccinate their children or not, and you get into personal freedom here. Unfortunately, what people don't understand with public health is that your personal choice affects a population. I will say this, for example, my child, who is 3 months old, our child, who cannot get the MMR vaccine quite yet because she's not of age. I can't take her on an airplane right now because I'm too afraid that somebody will have an unvaccinated child that might have measles. Yeah. And it is a very real infection that can cause havoc. People don't realize, because some of these diseases have been eradicated for so many years, polio, for example, that they're very dangerous. A measles infection, yes, you could say, well, I don't mind if my kid gets the measles. It's a rash. It's a high fever. There's so many complications that can happen during the infection process and years afterwards. Measles does this, the virus can mimic other viruses. It's very dangerous. It's not something that should be taken lightly. Children have died from this infection in Texas. This is something that I fear for my child, right? Because of other people's choices, because of their personal freedom. They've taken away my personal freedom to take my child to a place like Texas.
Well, what if you get someone who argues, well, it's my body, my choice? F you. Like, forget you. Like, this,
then they don't care about the well-being of our population.
So it's more of a selfishness. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are opting out of getting vaccines for your children, not only do you run the risk of them catching it, but also the spread.
Correct. And it's just disheartening. Our public health is about treating populations. I don't think people understand that. They're so caught up in like what's best for me and my family, and that's it. But public health theory is that it's for the greater good. And I know that's difficult for people to understand. Yeah. But if you can understand it on a personal level, for example, I can't take my newborn and I fear for going to public spaces with my newborn who is not protected right now from an infection like measles because she doesn't have the vaccine. That's a real fear for me. And I have to be careful. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a matter, we live in Utah. I think it's a matter of time before we have a measles case in Utah. People travel, Texas isn't very far. Yep. And people do opt not to get their children vaccinated. And I think that's not, personally, I think that's a terrible choice. But now it's affecting other children that do want to get vaccinated, like my newborn.
Yeah. Well, we can't say she wants to get vaccinated, but as parents, it's in her best interest for her to get it so she doesn't have to go through that experience or even risk death.
And just a little plug for the autism part. Because somebody will inevitably be like, I can't believe that you got your child vaccinated. And what about autism? All right. I'm going to say this. So I do have a child that's on the spectrum, and I myself am on the spectrum. both of us, my oldest child, got vaccinated. There is no evidence that vaccines are directly tied to autism. If anything, there are more genetic markers that might be associated with the autism, quote unquote, characteristics. So, for anybody out there thinking that, yes, I will get all my children vaccinated. No, there is no good evidence that vaccines, particularly MMR, cause autism. Not true.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like you still have people in this world that are not vaccinated that still have autism.
100%.
There's there's no connection there. And to be honest with you, since it's more of a genetic component, I think people are looking for something to blame besides their own genetics. I think that will sit better for people, and that might be a tough thing to hear, or there might even be non-empathetic to say. But I do feel like that is some case. If let's just say Sam has a kid and the kid's autistic, it's better for Sam to say, that my kid got his vaccines and then showed signs of autism, instead of my genetics gave him autism.
Correct. Yeah. I think sometimes it's easier to think something else caused it. And not only that, it's easier to come up with an answer. I think we don't know the answer, right? We don't know what exactly why people inherit or why people get autism. So it's easy to say, yep, that's a culprit. That's the reason that they get it. And that's not necessarily true. Again, oversimplification of a disease state is usually wrong.
What I think is kind of, and I could be, traveling outside the boundaries here, but what I think is kind of scary is the fact that there is an emphasis by RFK to look into autism with vaccines, and he's going to be in control of who runs those studies and how those studies are run.
Yep.
And
and he's going to come up with a solution.
That's what I'm saying.
Within a few years.
That's what I'm saying. So that could be scary, because then it's going to push the narrative that it is vaccines, because that's what he wants. It's literally
and
what he
that
wants
paper was
to be
retracted. True. I mean, it's just it's crazy. Anyway, let's talk about this false dichotomy.
Well, what about antibiotics?
Oh, what about them?
Well, listen. So I am a big fan of using them when you need them, and you use them the correct way.
And healthy people, please, if there's any one healthy person that hasn't used antibiotics, I'm pretty sure most have.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, some people, I know my mother would keep old antibiotics.
Don't do that.
In case.
Don't do that.
Just in case. We're not going to finish it. You're feeling better, and then all of a sudden, you still got something in your cabinet from 1997, amoxicillin from 1997. So, whenever you feel sick, pop it.
Don't do that.
Yeah, so you definitely don't want to do it. You want to use it the right way. I do feel like antibiotics have contributed to what they call superbugs, with being antibiotic resistant, because of improper use. For sort of whenever you feel a little bit sick, you take one, or you don't finish it to actually get rid of all of the bacteria that is causing the issues or the illness within you. So I believe in antibiotics as long as you use them properly.
Well, and let's just point out the obvious here. Terrain theory can't explain why would antibiotics work. And antibiotics have saved countless lives from bacterial infections, bacteria that we can see under the microscope. And antibiotics basically kill, if you want to be simple about it, kill the bacteria and restore health.
Yeah.
That is not explained by this quote unquote terrain theory. And let's talk about the false dichotomy here, because we're talking about it's germ theory or terrain theory. In reality, like I said, it's more complex. It's probably a little bit of both, right? Yeah. Modern medicine integrates both views, right? We know that a healthy immune system and good nutrition reduce disease risk. We do. We know that. But we also recognize, again, because it's more complex, that pathogens really still matter. Even the healthiest person can get tetanus from a deep wound, for example. Framing it as either Pasteur or Béchamp is very misleading and, again, oversimplifies a complex disease state.
Yeah, if I'm looking at it like a spectrum with Béchamp all the way to the left and Pasteur all the way to the right, I'm leaning more middle right to far right than I am middle left to far left.
Yeah.
But like you said, nutrition, good nutrition, proper exercise, proper movement, that's only going to support your body to be able to fight off things, but it doesn't mean you become immune, right? You don't turn into the fucking Terminator because you eat organic only and you do high intensity interval training, right? Like you could still get infected and you could still be.
Did you see that vegan that died?
No.
Because she starved herself or
no,
something.
I saw someone die because they were drinking raw milk over a dairy. Whatever. So, yeah, I saw that.
Anyway, basically to downplay germs and reject vaccines, you'll skip proven protections. This can lead to preventable disease outbreaks, especially for children, like we alluded to, and immunocompromised.
You just like had something pop in my head. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just said earlier that like I really do believe he cares about helping children, but putting the narrative out about how vaccines are bad
because he might kill children?
Yes, there's a hypocrisy there.
It's counterintuitive to me.
Well, that's a better
I'm like
counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's totally counterintuitive to me. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So what has RFK done so far? And he's done a lot. Let's put it that way.
A lot of good or a lot of nothing?
Well, to me, again, some people may like what he's done. I think he has been terrible as far as some of the initiatives he's put out.
Listen, before you even get into it, because you know more about it than I do, I will say that the one thing that I think that he done in the positive world, which I don't even think has that big of an effect on people overall, is the whole food dye stuff. Like, I don't even think like he's getting that stuff out of the foods now, apparently. Like,
but why does it?
It doesn't matter.
These food dyes are fine.
But here's the thing: like, I know that, and that's why I said it's not even going to really benefit
I'm sorry,
us.
my Fruit Loops aren't going to look as cool.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like you're putting this emphasis on stuff that doesn't even fucking matter, and like. I'm going to call it a positive because there are peoples on whether you talk political.
They don't like bright Fruit Loops. They don't like them.
Well, they don't like.
They don't like those colors.
They don't. Yeah. But
they're happy colors.
They don't. Yeah. They don't like that. But they'll drink alcohol on the weekends every weekend.
Oh yeah. They'll eat shit still. Yeah. But it's organic, so it's fine.
Agave nectar in your margaritas only.
It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, we touched on the autism research initiative. Sorry. He's launched a very ambitious effort, right, to find the cause of autism by September of 2025. That's in a few months.
Yeah, if we haven't found this yet.
Well, I'm thinking that he's already in his mind, he's found it, and he's the only one that believes it. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just can't not let my opinion come out about him. Anyway, he's going to find the cause in September.
He's going to find his cause. He's not going to find the cause.
Right. Anyway, obviously there's been a lot of organizational restructuring and layoffs. He's basically fired approximately 10,000 employees, maybe more by now. This is entire staff responsible for enforcing tobacco sales laws, which has raised concerns about the department's ability to prevent underage tobacco use. This is a big problem. Big problem.
Why would you go after those particular people, though?
Listen, I'm not going to talk. I'm not
just useless. Is that what he's saying?
I'm not going to talk about his motivation. I have zero clue about his motivation.
Well, what would you?
I don't understand. Again, he had a parasitic infection that affected most of his brain. I don't know how much of his brain is used.
If you're trying to protect children, and wouldn't one of the best ways to protect them would be to keep them away from using tobaccos?
Yeah, it seems intuitive, especially vaping. Vaping's a big deal right now.
It's huge. Yeah.
So obviously he's reduced the NIH and the CDC.
I don't mind cutting fluff, but when you start cutting stuff that really needs to be there, kind of like what you said with the NIH research and stuff like that, then you're getting into territory that becomes very dangerous. Like you're cutting stuff that you're like, oh, you're testing X, Y, and Z in fucking, I don't know, banana slugs. All right, I get it. Maybe you don't want to waste money on that. But when you're cutting NIH nutrition research funding,
well, and one of the most devastating things for NIH nutrition research was Kevin Hall, the nutrition scientist, resigned. He resigned, citing censorship and lack of support for his research on the very thing that RFK is trying to combat, ultra processed food addiction. This guy is the leading research, and he resigned.
So this is the exact thing that made me think like RFK is going to come up with an answer for the autism vaccine stuff, like, because he's going to control the narrative, what is being said and what is being tested. So, for example, Kevin Hall found out that there wasn't really any type of linkage towards like really bad health and ultra processed food addiction. Like there was no real connection there, and they didn't want that to come out, right? So there was a censorship there. Like he couldn't basically provide the information that he found because it didn't fit the narrative that they wanted it to fit. So Kevin Hall's like, forget this, man. Like I didn't sign up for this. I'm out. Like I'm going to resign because you're not going to censor what I find. And I think, Eryn, I think you could touch a little bit more on that, but is that pretty much a summary of what happened?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Anyway, we can probably go into more, his vaccine policy, and obviously, like, he's kind of retracted some of his anti-vaccine statements, but then kind of essentially said, it's kind of your choice. And it's a problem. It's a problem for public health. He's made advisory council changes, again, with HIV and AIDS and infectious diseases. He's done, he's done a lot of havoc. He's wreaked a lot of havoc.
Yeah, and I think, like, and this is not political, right? So just because we're bashing RFK doesn't mean that we're fully to the left, and just because I'm saying this doesn't mean that we're fully to the right. This is politics aside, right? I don't care if you voted for Trump. I don't care if you hate Trump. I think RFK is not making America healthy again with his current initiatives and the narrative that he wants to push forward. So once again, don't take this as a political episode because it has nothing to do with politics. We're strictly talking about RFK and, number one, why he thinks the way he thinks, but number two, what he's pushing out there and how it's not legitimate.
Yeah, and I think we can talk, I mean, obviously, we're not going into a ton of detail of all his initiatives or anything like that. This is very, dumbed down summary of what he's done thus far. I will say that, again, most physician groups that follow evidence-based guidelines, physicians that are in the public health sector, they are very disheartened and disappointed in this nomination pick and what he's done so far with public health initiatives. It's devastating to public health in general because we do have evidence that supports a lot of the initiatives that were done in the past, such as getting vaccinated and making sure that our population is healthy and believing that germs exist, for example. Anyway, not that good nutrition shouldn't be emphasized. That's very good place to start. But to deny the germ theory in general is wrong.
Well, I think we should end there. Our baby is just starting to get up now, so she slept for a good 40 minutes, actually a little bit longer than that, almost an hour. So yeah, we're gonna end there. If you guys have questions about this, reach out to us on our social media accounts, or shoot us an email, and we'll answer any questions that you have about this.
We might not have any followers after this.
That's okay. That's okay. I'd rather push out good information than have a ton of followers. So with that being said, we do plan on putting out an episode per week. Again, we're getting back to that now that things are starting to settle down a little bit.
Lofty goals.
Yeah, I know. But we're going to try to put one out every Sunday now. I believe we were doing every Tuesday or Thursday like that previously. But Sunday gives us an opportunity to actually sit down and talk to you guys. So with that being said, we will see you all hopefully next week.